Hello friends, it's Tanya and I am back with another video. This time we are going to focus on pumpkins and plaids. I'm going to show you how to make your own plaids two ways. Easy. They're both easy and they take about the same amount of time. We are going to use the Rabbit Hole Designs stamp set called Pumpkin Hair. Don't care. I am enamored with that grumpy looking pumpkin. I love him. He is so cute. So I'm going to take the main image of this stamp set and I'm going to stamp it with VersaMark ink all over a panel of cardstock. This happens to be a 5x7 cardstock panel. And I'm actually going to do this more than one time. I'm using the Hero Arts White Satin Pearl embossing powder. This is one of my go-to techniques for making cards. I like to stamp one of the images or several of the images with VersaMark ink and heat emboss with white satin pearl. It just creates a wonderful coordinating background. Whenever you have a little mojo block, this is a go-to for me. In this case, it wasn't a mojo block. This is what I wanted to do. Since I'm making more than one card, I am going to make more than one panel like this, but I'm only going to show you one of them. So I'm just quickly heating this with my embossing gun or my heat gun, and then I'm going to die cut this particular panel with one of the A7 double stitch frames from Honeybee Stamps. One of my favorite. That I use almost every time I stamp. Moving on to the main images for these cards, I am going to use the VersaFine Onyx Black ink on some watercolor. This is Canson XL 140-pound cold press cardstock or watercolor paper. And I do stamp this 2 or 3 times each time. I'm going to stamp it twice on this one piece. And I'm going to use the Brutus Monroe Icicle embossing powder. This is my favorite clear embossing powder. It creates such a thick, rich, beautiful, even on fine detailed stamps, it creates a lovely raised edge with a nice smooth embossing. Yes, I am picky about my embossing. We all should be. Maybe you shouldn't. Just me. So I am using some Daniel Smith watercolors here. I actually participate in a split that is hosted by Lydia Fiedler, and you can find her on Facebook, that particular split. This is the D split for those of you that are using her stuff, and I don't know what the names of these particular watercolors are, the particular colors I'm using, but I just have such a good time playing with these watercolors. They are such a great quality and so rich and vibrant. I am using a very watered down version. I believe this is D2 in the D split from Lydia Fiedler, if that's where you would like to get yours. You can buy full tubes from BLICK, etc., and I will have links to BLICK's stuff in my description box below. But I am going to create this watercolored background, a light blue. It does dry back a bit, and I'm going to make these pumpkins orange. You could do some white pumpkins, you could do blue, you could do green, there are gray, turquoise. There are so many beautiful shades for pumpkins, and squash. And squash is one of my all-time favorite vegetables. It's super versatile and so good for you. But love the little jack-o'-lanterns. We're going to add a little bit of red and orange and yellow to these little tiny flowers. I do love that this stamp set has the shading marks, so it makes it simple for you to decide where to put the darker shades of your watercolor ink or watercolor paint. And you can definitely go back and use the same color to add a deepened tone of that particular color. There are lots of ways. This is very quick and simple watercoloring that I'm doing here. And to ground these little pumpkins, I am using a little bit of a light reddish brown, and then I'm going to layer some green over the top. In the fall, we have lots of green and brown together on the ground. As the grass dies back a little bit, you still have some vibrant green mixed in with your brown, and I thought that tied the whole thing together. We'll just heat that a little bit before we die cut these with, these are the MFT or My Favorite Things stamp, dies, the stitched circle dies. I've had these for quite some time and they're another staple in my craft room. I also cut coordinating, I cut the coaster blanks from the same die to add dimension later. We're going to use both of the sentiments in this stamp set, and I'm stamping them on a piece of white cardstock. I believe this is 80 pound. Could be, who knows? I pulled it out of my scrap bin. It's at least 80 pound, if not 100 or 110 pound. And I am again using the VersaFine Onyx Black, and we're again going to use the Brutus Monroe Icicle clear embossing powder to add a little bit extra to these stamps. I love the finished look that an embossed sentiment gives you. You can skip the embossing if you'd like. You can just do the VersaFine Onyx Black or any other good black ink. This is the Nested Banners dies from Simon Says Stamp. I think this is another must-have in your crafting arsenal. And I'm going to die cut these quick using my Sidekick, which is, I'm amazed at how many small cording dies work on that Sidekick. So, plaid number 1. We're going to use the stamp set, I believe this is just plaid or buffalo plaid from Concord 9th. And I'm going to use Faded Jeans Distress Oxide. And you can use whatever ink you want. You can use the firm foam pads, tend to give nice even coverage. So do the Distress Oxides. I love the richness of the colors. They're not as vibrant as, say, the Distress inks by themselves, but I would, instead of using Distress inks, if you want super vibrant colors, I would use some form of a firm foam pad or some other dye-inked felt ink. But the Distress inks themselves are not very good for stamping. They're pretty splotchy. They're more designed for techniques. Again, this is a large cardstock piece. This is at least 5 by 7. And I just flipped it around. I used, as you saw maybe, I used the stamp packaging to help align it for the second set of stamps. And I'm going to continue to use my Misty. I have the long stripe, fine stripe stamp here that I am using to create an additional color here. I'm using the Silver Encore ink pad, and I stamped that all the way down, and I can do that in the Misty for the one edge, but I need to combine 2 images or 2 stampings to get the stripes all the way across. And what I'm doing is when I layer this or when I stamp it a second time, I try to line it up and overlap it with the previous stamping so it keeps the line a continuous image. Now, I tried to use the weathered wood on the Misty, but my felt pad is actually coming loose from the ink pad base. So I had to do it this way. And you can see the beautiful detail there. I like how that gray adds a little bit to this. Now this is method number 2. We're going back to the Daniel Smith watercolors, and I'm using some flat brushes. I believe this is like a 1 inch and a 3/4 inch and maybe a 1/2 inch I have in my hand here. Just different flat brushes. These don't hold a lot of paint, so you are going to have to load your paintbrush several times in order to carry the watercolor paint on your panel. This is again a 5 by 7 panel, and I've taped it down to a hard board using some blue painter's tape, and this is the more delicate surfaces painter's tape that I happen to have here. You can use washi tape or whatever repositional low tack tape you want. I'm using a darker blue this time, and I'm using a narrower paintbrush, and I'm going to go between these. It's super simple. You do want to try to do as few strokes per stripe as you can, because it get, as you may notice here, my stripes get a little wider with each pass. So I'm using less and less water as I load this paint up. I guess the alternative would be to make sure you mix up a big enough puddle of the ink, or excuse me, the paint that you want to use before you start, so you don't have to keep mixing it. But that's part of the joy of watercolor. I do recommend drying the panel between each color. Otherwise, it's going to be a little smeary. I am going to use a Brutus Monroe liquid watercolor paint here, and this one happens to be, I think it's called Maple, and it has a little bit of shimmer to it. And I still have a flat brush here, and it's not a super narrow one. I just turned it to the narrow edge. I also mixed up a little bit of a grayish purpley blue color. I believe it's called Moon Glow. I happen to know that one because I really like it. And I add some more little skinny stripes. I know this is getting really busy, but sometimes it's hard to stop. These plaids are so fun to make. And I am also using some white shimmer ink from Hero Arts. I just put a little bit in my palette here, added a little bit of water with my brush to thin it out a little bit, and I'm adding more of those stripes. They're more subtle. These don't dry back. What you see is pretty much what you get. The same with the Brutus Monroe watercolor, liquid watercolors. They're pretty much what you see is what you get when you put it down. And the big reveal. And honestly, the stamping version and the painting version took the same amount of time. Both of these panels took about 10 minutes to create. I have a 5x7 card base here. It's actually 7 inches by 10 inches, scored at 5 inches down the middle. And I am going to use coaster blanks to add a little dimension to my card here. So I'm going to glue those to the back of this double stitched A7 panel that I die cut with the Honeybee Stamps die. Putting that under my MISTI to add a little pressure just to help that dry nice and flat. And the same for the little pumpkin circle. Now, there are 4 different layouts here. It is so hard to cut apart the panels that you create, especially the watercolor one. I think that turned out so amazing. Oh, and this stamped plaid, I went back and added some rusty hinge stamped stripes. And I used a stamp from the Happy Plaids Concord 9th stamp set. And it's just one long strip that has this double stripe image. And I did it the same way I did with the other little thin stripes. I used a block and stamped those on. It was super fast and super easy. We're going to use these components to create different cards, and that's card number 1. It has the white satin pearl heat embossed background with the stamped plaid segment that I actually die cut from one of the smaller rectangles in the Honeybee Stamps A7 double stitched rectangles, and that fit perfectly across the larger stamp. Now this is, I think it's called Bonnie Blue, something like that. It's one of the vintage drops from Nuvo. I have been getting, I shop on the Tonic Studios website, and they have Wednesday deals and weekend bundles, and got these at a great discount. Check that out. I'll have that linked below. And it changes every week, so you never know if it's going to be cardstock, which is usually a mix of pearlescent and mirror, and their classic card, or there's some Nuvo combinations. Anyway, let's get back to this. So the second one we're going to put together is with the painted background, and I stamped and heat embossed in brass, I believe, that sentiment, and the die that I used to... Oh, I'll have to link it below because I don't remember the name of it right off the top of my head. It might be All the Hellos. It had this stitched element that created that word hello and added the pumpkin from the Friendship Farms stamp set, also from Concord 9th. To create that sentiment to go with this, I wanted something other than the 2 sentiments that came with that stamp set. And now I painted another pumpkin the same way I painted the others. I just didn't do the background stuff, and I fussy cut that, and that is also on watercolor paper, and that didn't take long to fussy cut. It was pretty quick. So we're using another, oh gosh, I used the white satin pearl heat embossed background panels on 3 of the cards today. Yes. That is a technique that is very versatile. So this time we're using it to tone down that background, that plaid background, which I love. And you see I cut a banner out. I was going to use that banner on the front of this card, but it didn't fit. It was too busy. I needed something a little different. So I'll save that banner and we'll use it on something else. I do use coaster blanks on all of the layers. Again, just gluing that on with the Barely Art Precision Glue. I'm going to glue the pumpkin to the hello circle. That circle and the stitched hello design or pierced hello design come from the same die kit or die set, and they fit together perfectly. I used some of that purpley blue colored watercolor paper. You may have noticed me zip through that to paint on a scrap of watercolor paper before I die cut that circle with the hello and the piercing. We're going to glue this little pumpkin and the sentiment together. I do have to fudge this a little bit because I want that, I just want to achieve the perfect balance. I just fuss with that just a little bit. And then I'm going to glue this flat down, no dimension behind this particular element. I want that pumpkin to overlap the pumpkin sentiment a little bit. I haven't put anything on the inside of these cards yet. I have no fear. There will be some decoration in there. I may just stamp that pumpkin and a little bit of pumice stone on the inside of the card and throw in a cute sentiment. We shall see. This is Auburn Pearl Nouveau Drops. And I'm adding that to the card. I like to do a little trail of these dots. I have the Nouveau Drops. I want to use them. And I'm going to try to use them a whole lot more. So I add this little trail that goes from one corner to the other. I want there to be an uneven number. Again, it's just a system that works well. You don't want to have to be thinking too hard about any of this. And I just tap it a little bit to settle those drops a little more flat. And the last, nope, this isn't the last. This next card is also a 5x7 card. We're using a panel that I created on a previous video, the Cats 3 Ways. I had made a bunch of these background panels on some yellow cardstock that I wasn't terribly fond of, but seems to blend super well. And I used the Trinity Stamps Slimline Space Swirls background stencil, and it's a layering set to create that. So if you want to see that, I will have the link to that video in the description box below. It's called Cats 3 Ways. And you can watch how I made that particular background. But I thought the pumpkin swirl just looked so magical with the pumpkins. So that space swirl is so much more than space. I love it. I think it is perfect for fall things also, or anything with a magical or Halloween twist to it. So I kind of placed that pumpkin circle in an area that looks like it's part of the swirl. And I am going to take these die cut foliage elements. They are from a retired Concord 9th stamp set. I had recently picked it up actually off of clearance. I don't find it available anywhere, but if you have it, there are so many dies out there that you can create these fine detail die cut elements. Just dig through your stash and find something. And I actually die cut those elements from it was sticker paper, printable sticker paper that I covered with chocolate glitter that I got from Nouveau. I'm not a big glitter person, so it came in a kit, and why not use it? So I was playing around. I put it on the printable sticker paper. It's sticky on one side, so I peeled that release paper off that. Sprinkled glitter all over, rubbed it in good, shook off the excess, then then glued that sheet of now glitter paper to a piece of cardstock, and then die cut my elements. And that way you can make your own glitter paper in whatever colors of glitter that you happen to have. It's a little messy, but not too bad. It's really not too bad. So I quickly realized that I need several layers of coaster blank to make this sentiment even across the card. I love how that turned out. Oh, and you're getting a little sneak peek of another pumpkin stamp set. So this is Picket Fence Studios Sequin Mix. They come in these adorable compact cases. I love it. This one's called Candy Corn Shot. I love the colors. They will work for many occasions, but they are perfect for fall. There's varying oranges and yellows and some white in this mix in several different sizes. They are flat and cupped, so you've got a nice variety of sequins to play with. The last card, of course, I had to do a slimline card. I have been suffering from slimline card withdrawal because I've been concentrating on doing birthday cards for work, and those have to be bigger. So this starts out as an 8.5 by 7.5 inch, no, 8.5 by 7 inch piece of white cardstock that I score at 3.5 inches to create this 3.5 by 8.5 inch slimline card. You can make slimline cards whatever size you would like, and I use the Trinity Stamps Scalloped slimline set to die cut the background panel, which happens to be another of the white satin pearl heat embossed backgrounds that I created for this set of cards. And I glue, this one stays pretty simple. So I glue the main image, which is popped up on coaster blank, and the sentiment. And then I add a few gems. I think I got these from the Ink Road, and she had giant bags of gems for not a terrible price, and I picked up several colors. And this happens to be I think it's called Shakira Gold, maybe. So that's all 4 of the cards. Plaids 2 ways. There's a third way you could do your plaid. You could use a pattern paper. There are lots of pattern papers out there that are plaids, and there's so many beautiful ones. I just love that by stamping them or painting them, you can create whatever color palette you want with them. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you give it a try. Let me know which of these cards is your favorite. And if you're interested in any of the supplies I used, I do have them listed and linked below in the description box. And I hope that you come back again soon. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon next to that so you get notified of every video that I create. Until next time, bye-bye.